Great. Welcome, 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 everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Wanda Sharif Rodriguez, and I would like to welcome you and thank you very much for coming to our very first Zeta Day at the Refuge on behalf of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, Sigma Kappa Zeta chapter of Brooklyn, New York. We welcome you. We welcome all our families and friends. We welcome all our community members. And we welcome all the people of women and of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated and our blue and white family, our brothers of Phi Beta Sigma, as well as our youth groups, our Pearlettes, our Amicettes, and our Zeta Arcanettes. Welcome all our Zeta Amici, all our Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated family and friends and community. Thank you and welcome to our first virtual Zeta Day at the Refuge. So just a little bit about Zeta Phi Beta for those in our community. Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Inc. was founded January 16, 1920 by 5 collegiate women at Howard University. They built our organization on principles of scholarship, sisterly love, and service. We have several national programs on, and on July 10th of 2015, our national president at the time, so our sorority sister, Mary Brewer Wright, signed a historic memorandum of understanding in Washington, DC, and partnered with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife to work cooperatively to engage urban youth into outdoor recreation and biological sciences and helpful activity in nature. Then we're going to have a great and fun day with our virtual tour. Each spring, the National Wildlife Refuge across the country welcomes the leading African-American sorority, that's us, Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, as a national partner of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services and Friends for Zeta Day at the Refuge. This joint initiative promotes the outdoor recreation and environmental education among Zeta members, including those who are not familiar with nature and public lands to have to offer. So we thanks to this tremendous work of our chapter's community service program in SKZ and collaborative efforts with the wildlife and fisheries at Jamaica Bay Wildlife and Fisheries. Right in our backyards in Brooklyn, we're able to bring Zeta Day at the Refuge virtually to your homes. You know, due to the coronavirus, unfortunate circumstances of the pandemic, we made alternative changes to this, and I hope you will enjoy it. The Rangers worked with us to have a great program today planned. So we will have our sorority sister, Andrea Wright, moderate any questions that you may have. So please direct your questions to the chat. And just a few housekeeping rules. Please keep on mute so that we can be heard and we can hear the Rangers, okay? And just a short bio as well on Erin Schoppenmeyer, our park ranger at the Jamaica Bay Wildlife and Fisheries. So Erin Schoppenmeyer has been a park ranger for the National Service since 2011. She spent her first 4 years working at the Statue of Liberty and has been working for the Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge since 2015. She worked in both the interpretation and education divisions for the park. So her favorite part of this job is showing people how much wildlife there is in New York City. I have a lot in common with Erin. I actually worked for the Wildlife and Fisheries before at the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island, so I'm very familiar with this work. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Erin and her ranger colleagues, if she brings them on, explain more about the National Park Service, Wildlife and Fisheries, and show you around Jamaica Bay Refuge. Erin?
Awesome, thank you, Wanda. I'm so excited to be here with you all. Start off by putting on my ranger hat. You can really kick things off now. I always call this my Smokey Bear hat. Really iconic, but actually just a fun little fact, Smokey Bear is part of the U.S. Forest Service, and I am a National Park Service Ranger. So before we get into things today, I just want to talk to you a little bit about what I do as a ranger. A lot of people see this badge, maybe they think I'm a police officer, but I like to tell everyone that I actually teach people about nature. I protect the place in a different way. I have people care about the parks and really want to foster a relationship between you and your outdoor community. The ranger hat is very symbolic. You see one of these walking around the park, you know you've got a friend, you can ask them any questions. We're very approachable. We love to chat with visitors. It's honestly the best part of our day. So I'm going to kick things off really quickly with just a short intro video about being a park ranger in New York City. It's under 2 minutes long, and you'll meet me again and a couple of my coworkers, but I think it really sums up what I do as a ranger as well as my fellow coworkers. And then we can get into a little walking tour of the refuge together. Let me get that all set up for you. Sure.
Remember to put your questions in the chat.
Yes, yes, please ask lots of questions.
Coming to New York City to work in a national park was not something I had ever expected I would be doing, but that's what brought me here. My name is Sheena Barrigal.
Gage Bon Jovi.
John Doskalakis.
Jennifer Gutierrez.
Rick Jenkins.
Jose Ramirez.
Aaron Schottmeyer, and I am a park ranger at Gateway National Recreation Area.
My favorite part about being a park ranger is the people who come with these parks.
I love nature, and there's ghosts here.
Sometimes people get confused that I'm a police officer because I have a badge.
No, I'm not a police officer.
I wouldn't want to arrest anybody.
I do not carry a firearm. My equipment usually involves a paddle and a life jacket.
I protect this place in a different way by getting people to care about this place and feel ownership.
The big secret is that we can't really do this job by ourselves.
A park is for everybody to enjoy.
So come, enjoy them, but leave them better than you found them.
New York City is such a big place. Millions of people live here, and sometimes it feels like we're loving our parks to death.
If you want to say it's yours, then you have to take care of it.
We don't just want to be here now, we want to be here forever.
I wish people knew that the story of Gateway is unique and special.
A lot of our visitors are New Yorkers, so to have a place where they can get away from the buildings, from the concrete, from the noise. I have the best office in the world.
All right. Video. So that just gives you a quick little overview of what we do here as rangers in New York City. Gateway National Recreation Area is really unique because we have sites in Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, and even in New Jersey. The site that I work at, this beautiful view behind me, is the Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge, which Wanda had already mentioned. Today we're going to go out on a little tour, and I will show you a virtual tour on the map here. So, 1 second. Let me take off my background. So basically, we will be walking the East and West Pond trails together today. The East Pond is just under a mile loop, and then the West Pond is 1.5 miles. So I hope you tied your laces up, you're hydrated. We'll see what we can see out there. Here we have the West Pond, so we'll be walking all the way around. And it actually leads out into Jamaica Bay. Jamaica Bay then leads out into the Atlantic Ocean. It's a very, very important part of our ecosystem. The other walk we will be doing is just a small little walk around the East Pond. The East Pond is much bigger. So here you can see the other side.
Same thing happened to me. I was parked at the bank the other day, and I'm like, listen,
Just want to remind folks.
I'm going to put the quarter in the meter.
Oh, wait,
I can also mute them.
please mute. Thank you.
There we go. Great. So we'll be taking walks around those trails. Just a few trail guidelines before we get going. I know we're all virtual, but get yourself in the mindset of being in the outdoors. It's a beautiful day here in Jamaica Bay. Just remember, when you're on the trails of the wildlife refuge, no dogs, no bikes, no running, and we want to stay on the gravel paths. And this is all to protect the wildlife that lives at Jamaica Bay. Over 350 different species of birds have been spotted here at the wildlife refuge. That's about half of, maybe a little more than half of the bird species that go through, that fly, either live in the US year round or migrate through. So when you think New York City, you don't always think nature. It's certainly not the first thing that comes to most people's minds, but we are an iconic spot for bird watchers, for migrating birds passing through here. Very, very important piece of wildlife or land here that we protect. So the very first video I will show you, we'll be walking along the East Pond Trail. I do want to say to everyone that I'm so excited about this walking program, this virtual program, because it is it's our first time doing something of this nature. It is truly a pilot program. So thank you for being my first testees, my first participants, my first visitors here on this virtual tour. With that in mind, hopefully we all run smoothly, but there may be a few bumps here and there because we are just testing things out for the first time, but still a very, very exciting moment for us here at the Park Service to be trying this virtual tour with you all.
We're excited to be the first, so.
Yeah. All right, so East Pond side. This side is really great for not just for bird watching, but there's lots of interesting plants here. So let's see what we find. Yeah. All right, so as we walk along the trail, the very first thing you'll see is one of my favorite trees. This is known as a white birch tree. This species is really important. It's been used all the way back from the Native Americans, has many different uses. For example, birch bark canoes were made out of this, as well as different types of medicine. It can be ground up and kind of made into a paper, even used for firewood and shelter. So this is a very common tree here. Woodpeckers love this tree. This tree doesn't have any, but as you're walking along, if you're lucky, you may see some woodpecker holes. So that's very exciting. We're going to continue our walk, and this is one of my most favorite places in the park. This is the East Pond Boardwalk. The fauna, the plants are so tall here that sometimes I feel like I'm walking through the jungle. As we're walking along, we're going to come across another tree that I really love, and that is a sweet gum tree. We'll get a close-up on the bark here. One key identifying feature is that pattern on the bark. When you look up, it is a deciduous tree, so it does have its leaves in the spring and then in summer, and it will lose all of its leaves in the winter. Actually, the same for the paper birch that we just saw. This tree, actually, if you listen to its name, sweet gum, the sap is so thick of this tree that you can chew it like gum. And in early days, it was used to treat or to clean your teeth. The thing that identifies it the most, though, is definitely its seed pods. Let's see if we can find any. Looks like we found some right here on the ground. They're almost alien-like. Zoom out a little bit. They almost look like they're from a different planet. They're spiky little seed balls. And these really help the plants. They move around easily. The seed pods are effective because it helps spread the seeds easily. And if you can see this one right here, it's got these little spiky tendrils. The spikes don't hurt though, just for show. So let's continue our walk. But before we move along too much further, does anyone, we'll pause for a moment for questions as we meander along the East Pond Boardwalk.
So yes, so we do have some questions, I'm sorry, in the chat. One first question we had was, how does one get to the refuge? You know, what trains would take you there?
Yes. And I'm sorry, I should have paused for questions before the first video. So yeah, the A train goes almost directly to the wildlife refuge. A fun fact I have to add is that it is the only subway, it is the only park where a subway runs directly through it in the United States. So if you take the A train to Broad Channel, it is a little bit of a walk. It's about 0.8 miles from the Broad Channel station. You can also take the Q53 or the Q52 bus line. And that dropped you off directly in front of the wildlife refuge.
Great. And by car?
By car, depends which way you're coming, but if you take, essentially, if you go to Cross Bay Boulevard, you would go through Howard Beach. It's in the neighborhood of Broad Channel, the wildlife refuge. So we're bordered by Howard Beach and then the Rockaways, the Rockaway Peninsula.
Right.
Most people take the Van Wyck 678 or the Belt Parkway. That's going to be exit 17S. To Cross Bay Boulevard. And if you use a GPS, I do recommend just type in the Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge. Don't type in an address because it will put you about a mile down the road.
So very accessible. Okay, and another question we have is what kind of land animals are native to this refuge and what time of year and time of day are we most likely to see them?
Yeah, so while we are known primarily for birds, we do have a couple of different mammals here. We have raccoons, which you certainly would prefer to not see in the day, but if you do see them, a lot of times, if they're not acting funny, like foaming at the mouth, they're actually just looking for food or taking care of their young. That's just a little PSA I like everyone to know. Just give all animals their space. Another animal that we have here, which some people aren't too familiar with, is a muskrat. So it gets its name, if you look at it, it has a rat-like tail. And they are primarily aquatic and they are related to the beaver. We don't have beavers here, but we do have muskrats. Another animal is the opossum, as well as squirrels and chipmunks. But other than that, we don't really have too many land mammals here. In times of year, really for any of the mammals I just mentioned, any time of year. And muskrats, if you come here, I would say in the evening, about an hour before sunset, you'll hear them moving around in the marsh grasses. That's my favorite mammal here. And if you kind of walk along the marshes and you're really lucky, you may see one.
Great. Another question we have is endangered species. Are there any endangered species that we can find there?
We do have the piping plover here, which has been moved to federally threatened, one notch below endangered species. So we're very excited about that. They're doing well. We have them here at the Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge. Primarily though, if any of you are familiar with Reese Beach or Fort Tilden, that is also part of Gateway. It's in the Rockaways, same park. Many piping plover nests there. In fact, we have a whole volunteer organization that we work with, and they walk the beaches. They educate people about the piping plover and why we close the beaches to protect them.
Erin, you mentioned that the woodpeckers like to peck at the birch trees. Does that affect the birch trees? Like, would that affect the livelihood of the birch trees?
It does not. But I will say that woodpeckers love dead trees more than and dead trees are amazing. They really provide so much life for birds, for fungi,
insects.
Dead trees are full of life.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, so we have a lot of questions coming in. Is camping permitted? What are the designated camping areas, if so?
So yes, camping is permitted at Gateway. We have, however, with the pandemic right now, it is not open yet. The 3 sites in Gateway are Sandy Hook, New Jersey, Staten Island. There are campsites at Fort Wadsworth. And then right here, our neighbors in Brooklyn, Floyd Bennett Field has camping programs and campsites. Those are all reserved on reserve.gov, reserve.gov. I've been telling people to just keep an eye out. Not opening yet, but as things, seem to go back to normal more and more, they haven't ruled it out for the summer. It's just, we don't have a date yet.
Okay, that was great. I didn't know that. All right, what preventative measures do you have in place in case of any natural disasters?
So that's a really great question. And actually here at the Wildlife Refuge, this map is a little bit old, so you can see, let me zoom in for you. right here, we had a breach happen during Hurricane Sandy. The trail literally split in half. And the West Pond was a primarily freshwater pond. Obviously, when Sandy happened, Jamaica Bay rushed in and that water became brackish, a mix of salt and freshwater. And as a result, lots of the trees around the West Pond started to die off because they were not salt tolerant. So now we have had a major restoration project. It took, I think we're almost 10 years out from Sandy now. We're going on 10 years out. We had to do an environmental impact assessment. We had construction crews come in. So the breach is what we call that, the break in the trail. We filled that in and then we reinforced it. So basically there is, I forget the exact material, I believe it's steel, plates underneath where they fix the trail. Water is so powerful, you really can't control water as humans. But we did the best we could to make that path as strong as possible.
Great. Okay, we'll take this one last question, and you do have other videos to share, right, Erin?
Yeah.
Yes, so we will continue the questions in between the videos. These are great questions, guys. I'm really excited about the questions we're receiving. So our last question before the next video is, are there any poisonous plants that we should be aware of in this refuge?
Yes, and actually that will be the next video I show. Perfect. So we have poison ivy here. And I always tell people, it's interesting in person, you get a lot of mixed reactions. If you've had poison ivy, you don't forget it. You just get a very itchy rash, usually for about 2 weeks. I've been a ranger for 10 years and I still manage to get it every year somehow, no matter how careful I am. The thing is that some people do have more adverse reactions. It is rare. If you're really lucky, you have no reaction. For most of us, it's an itchy rash for 2 weeks. And then it goes away. But I always say knowledge is power. So I am going to teach you how to identify poison ivy actually in this next video. That's a perfect segue.
Everybody pay attention.
Yes, which it's in the end, the last part of the video. But yeah, so we'll be swapping over to the West Pond for this video. Let me just pull it up right now. Just gotta swap over real quick. There we go. All right, so as we're walking along the West Pond Trail, you come across a structure. It looks almost like a house of some sort, but maybe not your traditional birdhouse. So think right here, think to yourself, what could this possibly be? What could this be for? If you thought that it was a bat house box, it is. A lot of people don't realize it, but we do have bats here at the Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge. They are little brown bats. They are nocturnal. So if you happen to be walking the trail at night, you look up and you see something flapping overhead. It may not be a bird, it may be a bat. Moving forward, our least liked plant here at the refuge is poison ivy, as I was saying before. So right here, we have those, they come in leaves of 3, shiny leaves of 3. That is the best way to identify it. And if you remember this little rhyme, leaves of 3, let them be, it will help you to not get poison ivy. We do have another plant here, the Virginia creeper, that looks similar. When in doubt, just don't touch. The next plant we have right next to the poison ivy is actually prickly pear cactus. I know probably what you're thinking, cactus, isn't she in New York City right now? I am, but if you think about the type of soil that a cactus grows in a desert, right? Well, the Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge is right by the beach. The beach has very sandy soil. So actually, this is the northernmost range for the eastern prickly pear. it really thrives in that dry, sandy soil. We can take another minute to pause for a few questions. Actually, before we do that, and I apologize if that was a little bit rushed, but I do want to show you, this is a little brown bat. Those bat boxes, that one that I showed you right there is actually too close to the trail where any bats would nest in it, but we do have different things like bat boxes and birdhouses close up with little signs so people can read about it and learn. So that's more just for educational purposes.
Great. I think people are very surprised about bats in New York, but they're here.
For sure.
We do have one question. We will take a few live questions. So we do have a hand raised. So we'll unmute Karen Gooden.
Hello, my name's Salvina, and my question is birch trees make roads?
Does birch trees make
roads?
Roads.
Roads.
Boats.
Boats. So there are iconic birch bark canoes. That I think is what birch tree. Thank you for the question, by the way. That was a really great question.
Yes, thank you, Alina.
Birch trees, they are a softer type of wood, so they're easy to carve. What was that? Oh, you're welcome. So they're easy to carve. So actually, the first peoples here in New York City were called the Lenape, and they took birch trees and made canoes out of them. That was one of the many uses. Thank you for your question.
Awesome questions. Okay. Another question we have, can you witness any mass migrations in Jamaica Bay? What animal species can one witness with mass migration?
Yes, surprisingly, there are two species come to mind. One is actually horseshoe crabs. So right here I have a horseshoe crab. Back up a little bit. And in about 2 weeks, if you are local to the area, it is a great time to see horseshoe crab migration. They will come up on the beach on a low tide by the thousands to lay their eggs. Now, let me pause just real quick and tell you, a horseshoe crab is not actually related to crabs. It is actually more closely related to an arachnid, to a spider. You look at all the legs. This is a better example. They are, so they're not crabs at all. And then another really important thing about them is a lot of people see this. If you see a horseshoe crab on the beach, don't be scared of this. It's not a stinger. It actually, I think if you think of a boat, it's more like a rudder. It helps them steer. If you see a horseshoe crab flipped over on the beach, they will stick this in the sand sometimes and it helps them flip back over. If you want to help horseshoe crabs, you can touch them. They're not dangerous, but never grab it here. I always say grab it like the steering wheel of a car if it's flipped over, and you just plop it back on its side. And we can talk a little bit more about horseshoe crabs too at the second part after we show the videos. I could talk forever about them.
Yeah, we did get questions if the horseshoe crabs were, do they sting? So you did answer that as well. And we do have a question about the bats. Are there any other species other than brown bats?
Primarily it is the little brown bat here. There have been species cited. They did a study in like the 80s. It does escape my mind. It's another species related to the little brown bat, but this is the primary species of bat that we have here at the Wildlife Refuge.
Right, and are they safe to be around, or are they poisonous?
They're safe. They're more scared, like most wildlife, they are more scared of you. So when you're walking around, if you're here at dusk, which is almost the only time you'll see them, they're going to be way overhead. You would be lucky to even see them up close, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, one last question before we move on to the next video. Are your legs the most common area for you to get poison ivy rash, since it seemed to be lowered to the ground in the video?
That's a really good question. For me, it's truly a personal response. Everyone's going to give you a different answer. Legs are quite common. I always get it in between my fingers. I mean, that's because I work outside a lot. We have a pollinator garden, a garden here that I'll do work with. So that's usually how I get it. One other thing about poison ivy, it does lose its leaves in the winter, but you could still get a rash from like the poison ivy stem. Right. And that's, yeah, because it's all about the oils.
Oils in it.
Yeah, and when it loses its leaves, it actually has like clusters of white berries. So in the winter, if you see a plant with white berries, just don't touch it.
Right, right. Okay.
Erin,
all right, we can move to the next.
I know you mentioned the last question, but just because you brought up the fact of encountering animals, is there a wildlife rescue around or something, someone you should call if there is an animal that's in danger?
Yes, so actually the DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation here, that's run through New York State. That is usually who we call. To get more specific, it really depends on the animal. So if it's marine life, we go to the Riverhead Foundation. They specialize in marine mammals, but generally speaking, DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation .gov, I believe it is. I can actually send you all the website after. They have a whole list of wildlife rehabilitators. So you truly look up the type of bird or mammal, and they have a whole list of numbers right down to what county in New York to call.
Okay, we'll be sharing some resources with everyone as well as Erin's information. I see we have our New York State representative for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. Hi, Sora Heron. So we will share her information with everyone as well.
All righty. Was that the last question, or we have?
Yeah, I think it's good to move to the next video.
So the next video I'm going to show you is it's actually back over on the East Pond side. I'm going to show you a bird blind. So while I set up the video, just try to think in your head, think to yourself, what is a bird blind? Maybe you already know, but if you don't, try to do your best guess at what it could possibly be.
A bird blind, okay.
And this pond that this video I'm about to show you is going to be at Big John's Pond. And it is ironically our smallest pond here at the Wildlife Refuge. So if you guess that it is a shelter, it's a man-made shelter usually with little cutouts, it allows us to see the birds or wildlife, but the wildlife to not see us. So it helps us be able to observe and watch wildlife in their natural habitat without us kind of bothering them too much. So we'll walk up on it. And this is a very, very peaceful spot in the park. It's a spot I really love. Sometimes I just like to come out, sit on the benches and observe. And when we get up and look out the window, try to see as best as you can. There is a nesting box at the other side of the pond. So it may look small in this video, but it is actually a barn owl nesting box. It's quite large. And when we finish the video, I can show you a close-up video. Barn owls are one of our more common species of owl that we see here. They nest here. They're here all year long. And they're one of my favorite owls because to woo a mate, so to speak, to kind of like draw the attraction of a partner, they will actually bring dead mice as a gift, so to speak, to try to win over their potential mate. So I don't know about you. I think that maybe like some food would work better on me or candy, but how a barn owl can help get its mate is to give them a gift of a dead mouse. I guess humans, it'd be a little different. So if you can see it far off there, I know it's a little hard to tell. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but I was just circling it. And we have barn owls that nest there every single year. So this right here is a close-up of that barn owl nesting box and actually 2 young barn owls poking out their heads. And I am lucky enough, I get to go with our natural resource team, our biologists, and help band them most years. So we put little tracking bands on their legs, and that kind of helps identify where they fly off to, and kind of how they're doing, how the population is doing. We can pause again for a couple of questions.
Sure, barn owls. Let's see if we have any other. We did get a question, and it's probably planned to be discussed as well, but just how one can become a ranger or get a job working at the wildlife refuge, and if there are any youth career readiness programs.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll kind of run through it quickly. As far as if you're young, very young, I always tell people it really doesn't matter the age, but get outside, explore parks, speak to rangers when you see them, really get to know the outdoors. And as you get older, we do have a couple of programs. The Student Conservation Association, the SCA, is for more so college age students and beyond. And they have paid internships. You can work right here at the Wildlife Refuge. You could work in Denali, Alaska with the sled dog team. The SCA is a really, really cool organization. Even younger, we have a YCC program, youth communities. I'm drawing a blank, but once again, I'm gonna create a list of resources to send everyone, but that's high school age students. The YCC program built our observation platform that you'll actually see in one of our later videos. And that was high school students. And then volunteering. If you're in high school or especially college and you're looking for some extra credits, volunteering is a great opportunity too.
And Erin, I just wanted to let everybody know at this point too, that myself, I'm an example of an intern that went through the Department of Interior working with wildlife and fisheries. And I did it while I was at Tuskegee University during the summers. I had 2 opportunities to work at the Statue of Liberty in Ellis Island. And I was offered a position with the fire out in Oregon, actually to be a firefighter. But I declined that and instead ended up with the wildlife and fisheries and working with the Statue of Liberty in Ellis Island, which was the best experience of my life. So I highly suggest that if you're interested in these types of internships, they're on the website for the Department of Interior. And then once you apply, you can, hopefully if you get a call, they will interview you and it's a great opportunity.
Great. Our very own ranger right here.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question and then in the chat, and then we'll take, we have 2 hands raised, I see at least. For now, do owls eat worms? Question from Matthew and Naomi.
Yeah, owls are birds of prey. More so they eat small mammals like mice, voles. They'll even eat smaller birds. And owls, so I have an owl right here. This is a northern saw-whet owl. So this is a bird of prey. If you actually can see its talons. So this little owl, he's small, but he is mighty. And he will even eat mice. They catch them with their talons. And if you look, they have very sharp beaks, which allow them to rip apart their prey and eat them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so our question from the chat, Alina, does Alina unmute?
Yes. Do owls have long feathers?
Yes. So owl feathers are really cool because they have serrated edges. So their feathers can be long. I don't know. This is a Oceotis, which is a long-eared owl. Oceotis is its scientific name. I can't spread its wings out too much, but this is a smaller owl. But if you see, it's probably about 1 foot long. Different birds have different wingspans. So I believe the great horned owl has like a 5-foot wingspan, which is pretty tall. That's a ballpark. It's not, but it's several feet long. The serrated edges actually help them fly really silently. So if you think of like a butter knife, the little bumps along it, that's serrated edges. And owls hunt at night. They have to be very stealthy. They're birds of prey. So those, if you were to see an owl fly, you would see it before you hear it because they are very silent flyers.
Wow.
About the owl, Erin, their legs look short with the feathers, but once you lift those feathers, what do you see?
Yes, I can actually show you. So this right here, they still have feathers, but they do have fairly long legs. And this is, like I said, it's one of the smaller species of owls, but it goes all the way up to my hand. So compared to its body size, it is a pretty long set of legs. But all the feathers do hide it. That's a good observation.
And also, what hunts owls? What are hunted?
They're predators.
Owls, I mean, they don't get hunted too much. I always say here, like the king of the refuge, so to speak, the king queen of the refuge, we do have bald eagles that come here. And all other birds like wouldn't want to hang around a bald eagle. Owls, a lot of the birds you wouldn't see hanging around owls either. But as far as like top of the prey chain here, eagles, and the more common bird is the osprey, which we will get into in a little bit.
I think we did have a question about other bird species, or are there other birds of prey at the refuge?
Yes, lots of birds of prey. If you come here in November, on windier days especially, that's more hawk migration season. I mean, we have, I don't even know if it's gonna fit in the screen. Red-tailed hawks. Yeah, and if you live in New York City, you can see one of these red-tailed hawks. They're one of the more common birds of prey. Look at how long the wingspan is there. We're really fortunate to have like several cool taxidermy birds. So hawks are one, owls, osprey, which we will, here we go. This is our kind of our landmark, or I always almost say the Jamaica Bay mascot. In the next video, you'll actually see an osprey nesting platform. So we'll talk a little more about those birds in a moment.
All right, I think that's a good segue to our next video.
Perfect. All right, so I will set that up. Let me just share my screen.
Keep coming with these questions. Some great questions coming.
Yeah, these are great. So the first thing we'll see is a barn swallow nesting box. And I love barn swallows. I call them the acrobats of the wildlife refuge. We will zoom in on a barn swallow in just a moment. But this right here is the osprey nesting platform that I was talking about. The last count I had, there's over 22 in Jamaica Bay now. And this is a great example of humans helping out wildlife. We build those platforms and the birds will begin to build, the osprey will build their nest on those platforms. Right here, you'll see there's lots of bird poop on it, but that's a drawing, an illustration of an osprey platform. They are several feet tall. And actually, when the video ends, I'll talk a little bit about how we really helped the osprey about 20 years ago now. Right now, we're going to zoom in on a barn swallow nesting box. So we do have a program here where we study barn swallows. We actually check to see how many eggs they lay each season in these different boxes. This one right here, it's a little bit far away, but he's poking it, or he or she is poking their head out. I always say they're like the acrobats of the refuge. They fly overhead, they'll dip and dive right close to you. And that's because they catch insects on the wing. They literally catch the insects, eat them while they are flying. They're really, really impressive birds. So we will take another stop on our hike here. And I want to talk to you a little bit more about the osprey. One of my favorite birds here. So I'll show you this again. And this is an osprey sitting up on top of one of the nests right here at the wildlife refuge. Actually, that nest that you just saw in the video, this is a photo. osprey will return to their nests every single year. They mate for life or until something happens to their partner, and then they will find a new mate. So that osprey that we see out here this year, it is the same osprey that come back every single year. And they will migrate as far as, we've tracked osprey that have migrated all the way down to the bottom of South America in Argentina. In the 1980s, there was a pesticide called DDT that was really ruining the osprey population. It actually made their eggs the shells of their eggs very thin, to the point where if an osprey sat on the nest, it would break the eggs. So they were ingesting this toxin. We as humans had this big movement. We regulated the use of certain pesticides. We put up these nesting platforms, and it's a great success story. Osprey were endangered, and now they are one of the more common birds of prey we have here in the Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge and all up and down the East Coast. And in Florida, actually, those osprey don't migrate at all. If the weather is warm enough and nice enough, they'll hang out where they breed all year long. And this is an osprey egg. I really like it because it kind of mimics the osprey itself. I know we don't have like a full body photo of it, but they are kind of modeled. Their wings are brown and dark black with white. And one last, I have so much to say about the osprey. I could talk about just a program on that.
They're beautiful.
Yeah, and this right here, the black around their eye. If you have any baseball fans out there, you ever see baseball players put black underneath their eye? If you play, you may know that it helps reflect the sun. So I always like to say that baseball players totally stole this idea from osprey because they feed primarily on fish. So they're flying over bodies of water. On sunny days, that water, it reflects, it's almost blinding. So this helps them reflect the sunlight.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. If there's any questions, I know we have a lot of our youth on, I see hands raised. If you have questions, feel free to ask. I can take you off mute. I think Miss Naomi, did you have your hand raised? No, she put it down. Matthew says no. Alina, does Alina have another question?
Yes. Are they herbivores or carnivores?
Oh, the osprey? That's a great question. Thank you, Alina. So osprey actually they're carnivores. They have these feet or their talons swoop down feet first into the water and catch fish that way, feet first. They're a nickname for them is fish hawk. They feed solely on fish, which is why you'll always find them in coastal areas. They I almost say their feet are kind of like, think of like a vending machine. they dive down, swoop down and catch fish that way. It's really fun in like July, August when the juvenile, the young osprey are learning to fly and hunt. I love watching them fish. Their accuracy is almost dead on, but you can always tell a new osprey because sometimes you just see them absolutely fail and have to try again until they get some.
Wow. All right. So Matthew and Naomi, do we have a question? You have to unmute first.
Yes.
How
many pounds do they weigh?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Actually, we can look that up together. So as a ranger, I always say that I am learning new things every day from our own visitors.
Yes.
And I have right here, yes, if you're familiar, this is a bird guidebook here. Oh, actually, well, we'll get to that after. I did put up or bookmark a page of a tree swallow because I know we talked about them. They're a beautiful iridescent blue. Let's see. And their osprey wingspan are actually, let's see, it gives you the length here too. That's why I love these guidebooks. It'll give you photos of the bird and I'll tell you all about the bird. So their wingspan is about it can get up to 30 inches. So that is not 30 inches, I'm sorry, 33. That's how tall they are. Their wingspan is, sorry, it's almost 6 feet at times. Trying to do math in my head. They are, it actually doesn't have the weight here. So we will have to, that is something that I will get back to you on. But yeah, thank you for that. That's, so my thing is, I always teach our new rangers, if you don't know, either work through it together, or, you know, you can, sometimes when I don't know, I take the visitor's information and then I get back to them later.
Yes, so we could do that.
I love learning from all of you.
We could share the answer with our Perlet, Miss Naomi.
Yeah.
All right, I don't see any other hands raised. So we'll go to the chat. How do you attract the birds to come to the nesting barns, or is that an innate nature for them?
Yes, so for the osprey, it's fascinating, it's innate. I mean, we put up a platform and then that season, the migration season, there will be a bird nesting on that platform. I don't know what they're drawn to, without human interference, they're drawn to dead trees, they're drawn to telephone lines. So they just see that sole perch there and it's innate, it speaks to them, I like to say.
Awesome. Is there competition for food resources?
We're lucky at the Wildlife Refuge. There are lots of food resources here. That's why birds love hanging out here. But out, you know, in less protected areas, there can be food sources, and not even so much for the osprey, so to speak, but like the snowy owl is a great example. Snowy owls, they live up in the Arctic, but every 4 to 5 years, you'll see actually a large population, even here in Jamaica Bay, here in New York City. And that's because they feed on lemmings. So when the lemming population is low, they'll actually move further south where there's more food resources. It's actually one of the biggest reasons why birds migrate. In the winter, if you're a herbivore, you feed on berries, or you feed on insects, even an omnivore. In the winter, you don't see that as much here. So you got to fly south for more food resources.
Very true. All right. A question that I had was just with the pandemic, did you see more visitors or less visitors, would you say?
That's a great question. We saw way more visitors because one thing we could all do was be out in nature. Yeah, you know, you could social distance much easier out in a park. So it was at first we didn't know what to do. We were excited, but we definitely had to step up just our outreach, just to educate people to make sure they stayed on the trails, respected wildlife's distance. But yeah, definitely an uptick in visitors.
Wow.
And it was great seeing people take advantage of the park.
Wow. Okay. Let me see if there was any other questions. That's great. So I hope everyone here who's never been will go out and visit. Do we have anyone who's been to the Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge before? No? Well, now that you've been introduced, this will be a great time to get out there and enjoy nature. There's a last question before we move to the next segment. Is butterflies. Do you have butterflies at the bay?
Yes, we have lots of different species of butterflies here. My personal favorite is the Eastern tiger swallowtail. It is yellow and black. It's a bigger butterfly. It is any swallowtail butterfly I love. The most well-known is the monarch butterfly that we have here. And we actually have I'm looking at it right now. We have a garden, a pollinator garden that we plant for different, you know, birds and insects to come and pollinate. Monarch butterfly, we plant milkweed. So if you're familiar at all with the monarch butterfly, a lot of times you will know a little bit about the milkweed plant. They feed exclusively on milkweed. It is a keystone plant for that species. They also lay their eggs on the milkweed and form the chrysalises, which they then hatch out of.
Awesome.
So yeah, they're awesome. We literally can watch it firsthand, go from caterpillar to butterfly. It's really cool.
Awesome. We need to pay a visit. I did a
Yes.
workshop with our youth, our 4 to 8-year-olds on monarch butterflies. They loved it. So we definitely need to have a field trip out there. Yes, Miss Ferna, I see your message. We are working on getting out there.
Nice, nice.
Erin,
Erin,
are you aware of any studies being done to show any changes in the environment and the wildlife since coronavirus pandemic took place? Because there were some talks and maybe some publications are out there about how there's been an increase in certain species or things like that because of everyone staying still and maybe less pollution within that time frame. Are you aware of anything?
Here at the park, no, not specific to the Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge. I've seen things in like the news and stuff that, yeah, I think similar to probably to maybe what you've seen, Wanda. And it's very interesting to me, but at the Wildlife Refuge, even from what I've seen here, I haven't seen too much because weirdly enough, I would say the first month or two, there was no one here. But then after that, it was like life is normal in the sense of the trails. So nothing on our end. Our natural resources team might be doing studies. If they are, we'll probably find out about that, in the next few months or so.
Good.
Question with the butterflies. Is there a butterfly day, special butterfly day, or is there a good time? What's the best time to see the butterflies?
Yeah, actually, August is a great time here to see butterflies. There is a monarch butterfly day that it's like one of those like this like an event a day type things, but we normally do like a monarch festival during that time. We might be doing a virtual one. So I will actually once again, that list of resources, I'll send along information if you want to sign up for the parks newsletter.
Oh yes, please do.
Yeah, and that's really cool. So we've done, guided butterfly walks in the past. We have crafts and things. So if we don't do it in person, it's always in August. There should be something virtual.
Okay, great. Can we ride our bikes at the bay? Is there a bike rental?
So at the Wildlife Refuge itself, on the trails you cannot ride, but we are right along the Jamaica Bay Rockaway Greenway, and that loops all around the bay. I've never done the whole thing; that's on my bucket list, but it is a really nice ride. At Shirley Chisholm Park, actually in Brooklyn, which is a state park. They have what they call a bike library, and it's free bike rentals. They do it on Eventbrite, so it's free, but it does get a little busy. And all you have to do is have a parent with you, and they would leave like a license or some type of ID, and you're free to rent them. You just have to return them, I believe, by 6 p.m. It's a really awesome program.
Awesome. All right, I'll see if I missed any questions. I don't think so. And I don't see any hand raised. I think we are good. Great question, you guys. Very engaging. So I think now we move on to our next segment, which is our show and tell.
Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. So I have so much stuff here, and I love that you actually asked some questions already, which set the stage really nicely for the show and tell. So one thing we talked about a little bit was horseshoe crabs. So right here, I know I had already showed you, this is the actual horseshoe crab specimen. This is not a horseshoe crab specimen. Horseshoe crabs, like snakes, will actually molt. And how you can tell the difference between a horseshoe crab, an actual horseshoe crab, or a molt is right here. So this is solid. This right here, I always say it's almost like if you flip it upside down, it's like it's smiling at you. Get you zoomed in on the camera, so it actually slips out from the shell this way. So if there's an opening right here, that means it slipped out into its new body, so to speak. So yeah, just like, and look at how perfect it is. I mean, without knowing that, it almost looks like this is like a real, this one's in better shape than this one right now. A lot of its legs are missing. So yeah, it's lighter in color, generally speaking. It's a molt, and you can always tell because there's like this little thing they slide through. Another thing that I really love about horseshoe crabs that I find fascinating, we have this right here. Now what, it's probably not going to translate too well on the camera. This looks like a bottle of medicine, right? You put a syringe in it. So what does this have to do with horseshoe crabs? Horseshoe crabs and this white substance?
We have
this is called,
we have a hand raise.
Yes, yes.
Taking a guess. Jamaica.
What I think it has to do with horseshoe crabs is that I heard this before, but horseshoes have this type of blood, which is blue, and people use it to make medicine.
Okay. Awesome. Yes, good job. So this is called Limulus ambisite lysate. It is used as it's more commonly known in the medical field as an LAL test. So the horseshoe crab blood is actually used to perform this LAL test, and it actually can help determine if there's any bacteria or toxins in different like vaccines and things like that. So if you've ever received a vaccine, there's a good chance that you may have been helped out by a horseshoe crab. So it's really interesting. And actually, if you Google horseshoe crab blood, I know it might sound like a kind of a weird thing to Google. It is a beautiful blue color. Actually, it's really fascinating to see. And that's one of our, I always say one of our like mascots here. We have, right now is the time of year, coming a week or two during a full moon. So I didn't look up when the next full moon is, but whenever that is, it is high time for horseshoe crab breeding, where they will come on shore by the thousands sometimes and lay their eggs. And actually moving forward with that, the red knot is a migrating shorebird, and they depend on these horseshoe crabs. They come all the way down from Argentina, and they'll fly up way up north to the Arctic, and they need these horseshoe crabs. They will double their weight in eating horseshoe crab eggs, and that helps them on their journey, their migratory journey that's thousands of miles long. So that's a great partnership between two different species, two different kinds of animals. Anyone have any questions? I think a few came in about horseshoe crabs.
Yes, we see how many eggs can each horseshoe crab lay?
So that, I believe, it's hundreds, if not thousands. Do you mean like at a certain, I'm just going to go with at a certain time. I believe it's hundreds, I believe. I'm not sure on the exact number of that, but if you're walking on the sand, basically they'll like dig out these little nests with their feet, and you'll see a bunch of tiny little eggs, tiny little eggs.
Wow. Is there any way that that horseshoe crab blood could be used for a corona vaccine?
Ooh, I don't know, but if it has to be, like I said, they test to see if there's toxins in the vaccine, so it is very possible that they use it, but I'm not sure.
I can actually answer that. I was worked in the vaccine industry. That particular vaccine does not have the horseshoe crab in it, the toxins or whatever in it. It's a different mechanism of action of vaccination process. So those are generally used in the traditional vaccine technologies. Just to give it a little help.
Oh, thank you. See, I love that. What a good follow-up. Is that like
world?
Yeah, is that in like live vaccines more to?
Yeah, that's more in the traditional vaccine technology, where they have to take a small fragment of the antigen and create antibodies. So because of that, you want to make sure there's no toxins.
Yeah.
Genetic, yeah.
Very
great
cool.
information and great questions. I'm not seeing any other questions so far.
All right. So let's see. I also have, I forgot I have these right here. I was so prepared, I didn't even realize. We talked about monarch butterflies. So these are monarch caterpillars. And actually, this is the same monarch caterpillar, and it's grown nice and big and fat eating that milkweed plant, which will then form a chrysalis. And the chrysalis, I actually have photos as they're ready to emerge. You can kind of see it here. It might not translate too well on the computer, but as they're getting closer and closer to breaking out of that chrysalis, you can actually see the monarch's wing through it. It becomes very thin. It's really cool. And this right here is our monarch butterfly. It's absolutely beautiful. It really stands out. You don't see too many things in nature that are bright orange. And that's actually a sign. So the milkweed is poisonous, and that is what monarchs feed on. So that being said, it makes them poisonous to predators. There is another butterfly that is called a viceroy. It looks very similar to a monarch, and we call that mimicry. So basically it's copying the monarch. However, viceroy are not poisonous. So this isn't the best way to tell the difference, but if you see something that looks like this, if it's flying like it doesn't kind of have a care in the world, straight line maybe, that's probably going to be a monarch because they are not worried about prey catching them. So they can kind of float about. If you see a viceroy, their flights are generally way more erratic. They're flying all over the place because they are not poisonous. So that's like another defense mechanism for them.
Wow, I gotta look out for viceroys now.
Yeah, definitely not as common, but like there's been a few times where I've been walking around, and there's other like little ways to tell, like with the white spotting and things like that. But that is usually if I'm walking around and I see a crazy looking monarch, I'm like, is it really a monarch?
Right. Gotta look out for that. Okay, yeah. We have a question from Matthew and Naomi, and then Crystal Thomas.
How long does it take a monarch caterpillar to turn into a monarch butterfly?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So here at the refuge, we kind of time them out, usually a few weeks. Have you, Andrea, I know you did a lesson on them. Did you actually do it where you were not stages? Yes, the different stages.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's usually a few weeks here for us.
Yeah, I don't recall the way, but it is several weeks. It does take some time. And then you have cool time-lapse videos. If you just go on YouTube, you could see a time-lapse video. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Actually,
thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, growing up, we had milkweed near my house where I grew up, and my mom was a park ranger. So
oh, wow.
that was kind of like my introduction to nature. I remember going out and like each day we'd go out and kind of make observations on milkweed plants to see the first the eggs, then the chrysalis.
Right.
Yeah, to see the life cycle.
One thing that was cool that we learned about monarchs is that they can go back to like if their ancestors was at a certain tree in Mexico, they go back to the same exact tree. So it takes like 3 generations to get through the season, and they can go back to the exact same spot that their ancestors were born. So kind of amazing.
I forget the name of the town in Mexico, but there is a town, and like when they finally get there, it's like this whole, it looks like a tree of monarchs, honestly. Some of the photos I've seen, it's really, really cool.
Right. Thank you, Matthew. Great question. Crystal, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I just wanted to confirm that you've said before that the mass migration, that it was a horseshoe crab, and I'm assuming the other one is the monarch butterfly, the other species. And then secondly, do you guys have any problems with any invasive species that have come to the Jamaica Bay area? And how has that affected the ecosystem? And with this new emergence or reemergence of the broadaxe cicadas, do you guys have a plan in store? How are you guys going to adjust the ecosystem? What do you do to manipulate that?
Yeah, so very good questions. Thank you. Real quick, it's funny. I was going to talk about the monarch, and we actually circled back to it. So I love that. And then invasive species are so relevant here at the Wildlife Refuge. I'm actually just going to take a couple of minutes to speak on this. The Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge, interestingly enough, is almost all man-made, in the sense where these were salt marshlands, and they were actually proposed to turn into like a shipping port, and they were saved. The first caretakers of the Wildlife Refuge was New York City Parks in the 1950s. And during that time, it wasn't wasteland, but it was dry, sandy soils. It really wasn't too much. There was marsh grass growing here, but the majority of species here, even if they aren't native to the area, they were still planted here at the refuge. So we really, in both of the ponds here, the east and west ponds were man-made, completely dug out. So it's such an interesting study between humans and nature. As a result, though, some species were actually deliberately planted here. So many invasive species are ornamentals. They're actually beautiful. If you've ever seen honeysuckle, it smells lovely, pretty white flowers, but it does take over an ecosystem. We have Phragmites here. I should have pointed it out in that video, but when I was talking about you feel like you're walking through the jungle, all of those tall, marshy plants, marsh grass plants, were actually Phragmites. They will take over an ecosystem. They're very, very hard to eradicate. It's actually pretty much impossible. There are some benefits to them, or they do help in some ways. They provide shelter for like nurseries of fish. Native marsh grasses will also do that. So of course we do prefer that. We have many restoration projects going on here at the refuge. I'll speak on two very quickly. The American Littoral Society, Littoral. So a lot of people hear that and think literary. Littoral actually means shoreline. I didn't know that before I started working here. So they do marsh restoration projects. So we work with them. They will go out to salt marsh islands and actually plant native salt marsh plants. So we don't try to pull out the Phragmites, we just try to plant native salt marsh plants or salt marsh grass. And then another project we did here a couple of years ago with the Nature Conservancy, we removed thousands and thousands of invasive plants, and then planted 17,000 native plants here. Anything from trees to shrubs to grasses to kind of help restore the natural environment. Unfortunately, with Corona, when no one was here, we weren't allowed to. There was actually 3 months where no rangers were even here. So it's not a lost cause, but we did take a few steps back. But we actively try to pull out native plants once we can have volunteers again. That's a whole volunteer program we have. Invasive plants, we take out invasive plants. I keep saying that interchangeably. And then we do try to plant native plants here to the area. So I don't know if I feel like I went off on a tangent, but yeah, so that's just a very relevant topic here at the refuge. We're constantly trying to balance the native plants versus invasives.
And can you mention, you mentioned the volunteer programs shortly. Can you mention a little bit more just in case those are, and maybe even as a chapter, we can look at volunteering, or is it like day volunteer efforts? Like what kind of volunteer efforts?
Yeah, so we have a great volunteer program. I know that our volunteer team is just starting to meet again about projects that, now that hopefully we can start taking volunteer groups again. We do have, I'll speak about the Park Service one in more detail, but we do have partner organizations that are still allowed to do their own volunteer stuff here. We just can't officially interact with them until some restrictions with the pandemic lift. But one thing they've been doing is beach cleanups here at the Wildlife Refuge. So even though we have tighter guidelines, I'm so thankful that these partner groups are still able to kind of go out on their own and do things. For us, primarily, we have a couple of different options. We have days of service. And those are, there's one in April, there's one, we tend to avoid them in the summer because it's very, very buggy here. There's one in the fall where we'll either do major mass plantings of native plants or big beach cleanups. So that's another resource. With the newsletter, it'll tell you about different volunteer opportunities. So there's stuff out in the field like that, those days of service, specific groups. So if you all wanted to come and do a special event on your own, doesn't have to be a day of service, like a beach cleanup or a planting, you contact our volunteer coordinator and she will help set something up with you. And then we even just have people that come, on their own that ask for a trash bag and they'll clean up the trails. So, and there's nothing too big or too small really to help out.
Okay, there's a question of how do we get the newsletter? So you'll share that information with us, Erin, right?
Yes.
And we'll share that with everyone.
Definitely. And then actually the person that sends out the newsletter is the same person as a volunteer coordinator. So when I give you her email, she is actually, I'll write it down, but she's both. So it's great.
Okay, good to know. Mm-hmm.
All right. And one thing I want to plug really quickly, if you are speaking of like volunteering and things like that, we actually just came out with our new junior ranger book. It was designed by one of our rangers here at the Wildlife Refuge. So when you come and visit the trails, right now, starting Memorial Day weekend, we will, the building is still not open, but the visitor center will be moving it outside. And you can come pick up a free junior ranger program from one of the rangers out front. There's so many cool activities that kind of allow you. This one really focuses on your senses, really putting yourself outside in nature, as well as just like how we interact with wildlife. It's really, really cool. So if you're new to the park, if you're not new, we have a new junior ranger book. It's free, it's self-guided. And until we're doing more ranger-led programs, this is a great opportunity to explore on your own. And then in the end, you get sworn in as a junior ranger. So you get your own little gateway badge. But that's one thing that I love telling you, especially you can be my age, you can be 99 years old, you can be 2 years old, anyone can do it.
All right, we're going to be junior rangers.
Yes. I still collect them when I go to other national parks. So
nice. Right. I was going to ask, what is the other closest U.S. Fish and Wildlife park? I think I know.
So we have in New York City, there are 16 national park sites. Everything from, we're really the only natural one. I mean, you have the Statue of Liberty, Federal Hall, Grant's Tomb in Manhattan. Gateway is great though, because it's large. So you have here at the Wildlife Refuge, Floyd Bennett Field in Brooklyn is great. We have outdoor opportunities, but it's also New York City's first municipal airport. So there's a lot of aviation history there. Amelia Earhart flew out of there. A lot of famous aviators, so lots of cool history. There is actually an aircraft hangar where we have a volunteer crew that restores like World War II era planes. So that's truly, we can see it from the refuge. It's right across the bay. And then we have, we have tons of city parks here that actually, we have urban park rangers. There are like friends, our counterparts. They offer lots of awesome like guided programs as well. For me, I know the Queens one's much better, but like Forest Park in Queens, Prospect Park in Brooklyn is great. There is so much green space in New York City. And Shirley Chisholm, I actually just visited there for the first time. It's amazing. It's completely free. It has those free bike rentals. They have a nature center. So many opportunities.
Awesome. And they are part of the national parks. and recreation, but are they USFW?
So it's really interesting. They are, the National Park Service owns the land. The National Park Service leased it to the state for 60 years. So it's owned by the federal government, by the National Park Service, but it's run by the state.
Ah, okay. Awesome. Lots of places to visit.
Yeah.
And don't forget the Statue of Liberty in Ellis Island.
Yes, yes, of course. I know, we both work there. I should.
Yes. All right. Yeah, I see there's discussions of planning events to visit. To visit.
Erin, are
as a
there
group.
any possibilities of whale watching?
Yes, so there is it's out of Sandy Hook more so in New Jersey, but they do offer like boat rides and things. With the pandemic, I don't know if there's any plans currently. There's actually, it's not exactly whale watching, but we do kayaking here, free kayaking, and we definitely are doing that this summer. We're a little too close to shore to see whales, and it has happened before. We do see seals, which is really cool. And those, once again, I will send the resource out, but it's a free reservation. You can choose long trips or short little trips in just a single cove. It's with a guided ranger, and they're all summer long at a Floyd Bennett Field in Brooklyn. So that one's really fun. And he will actually do group tours as well. So I'll pass that info on too.
Awesome. Looking to see if we have any other questions, any hands raised. Okay, here's a question. What about fishing? What suggestions would you have for introductory fishing where you can toss it back, what you catch?
I love that question, specifically because it's close to my heart. So I offer a fishing clinic. I'm hoping to start them up again in the fall. We work directly with the Department of Environmental Conservation, and this is another site. We do it at Canarsie Pier in Brooklyn. That's another part of the park that I work at. And essentially what we do is we teach, we even provide the rods. It's all catch and release. We do another like a junior angler program. So we kind of teach you about the fish, the regulations. And it's just really fun to get people out there. And if you're an experienced person who fishes, then throughout Jamaica Bay, some places require permits. They're all free. It's just a matter of registering. And that's more so just to be able to have access. So like if you were to fish out on Reese Beach or off Fort Tilden, you would need a special permit. That's all through the Floyd Bennett Field Visitor Center. And then to saltwater fish, this is a free permit as well, but you sign up for a saltwater fishing permit through NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Now, Erin, there were when I worked as a park ranger, there were some issues that if you did fall into the river off the boat, you had to go get a tetanus shot. I'm not sure what happens when you fall off of a kayak anywhere near the Hudson River. Maybe you have updates on that?
Yeah, so as far as the rivers, I'm not too sure. In Jamaica Bay, I've fallen when I've gone kayaking. I just recommend to be checked out. You're not required to get a tetanus shot if you fall into the waters here at Jamaica Bay, but there is, unfortunately, Jamaica Bay is a watershed, so a lot of trash floats down in there. I just recommend that if you were ever to be like submerged, just to get checked out. I'm also like an EMT, so that's like my medical side of things, saying go get checked out. But yeah, I'm not too familiar on like freshwater regulations, since we're all saltwater over here.
And with that, you may even be able to talk a little bit about cleanup program. I mean, you know, how it's important to protect our environment because of pollution and throwing things in the river and the oceans, like we don't want.
Yes. So this is a two-tiered thing for me. So one, Jamaica Bay is a watershed. And essentially, if you're not too familiar with that, it means that if you throw your candy wrapper outside your street in central Brooklyn, it is a watershed, and all rivers and trails and waterways lead to Jamaica Bay. So you definitely don't litter, recycle when you can. We have a program called Clean Shore Core. Another resource I will send you. It's an educational program. So we do it with schools. We haven't done it with a non-school group, but I don't see why we couldn't. Basically, it's a two-tier project where you do a trash pickup normally outside of your school, but you could do it on your street, and you catalog the trash you find. And then when you come to Jamaica Bay and do a trash cleanup, you catalog what you find. And it just shows people that everything ends up, it's the same things you find right outside of your own street. So it's a great program. It really it helps clean up. So, you're doing your part helping out, and it also really draws connections to how really, throwing your trash outside at your home or, in the park does end up leading right back here to Jamaica Bay.
It doesn't magically disappear. It shows up somewhere. But nobody here litters, right? So we don't have to worry about that. No littering going on here. That's right.
That's right.
I see the heads shaking.
Let your friends know about what you've learned today.
There you go.
Yes.
Why it's important to keep the environment clean.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Question that I looked back that I had missed was how many park rangers are hired at Jamaica Bay?
So right now we have one supervisor, 2 permanent rangers. So I'm here year round, and so is my coworker. Normally we have 3. Someone just left, and then we have 5 seasonal rangers, which means, and they just started 2 weeks ago, and they are here from May till about end of October. And one really cool thing, that's how a lot of people start in the Park Service, is seasonally. And I always love every year when we have our new seasonals come on, because it's great because we either have people that they're from New York City, they know this area well, they know the resource well. So I love having native New Yorkers here. And we also have people that are like, I worked in Utah, I worked in Texas. So it's just such a cool mix of people in the community here.
I can remember also that being an intern there, also you at a government status like G level. So you can, wherever level you end at, you can always go even higher the longer you are with the Park Service, and they're great benefits of being an employee.
Actually, Wanda, thank you for saying that, because I said how as a student you can get involved, but in applying for jobs with the Park Service, generally speaking, to be a GS5 seasonal, that's entry level starting ranger, there are exceptions, but generally speaking, a 4-year degree, it can be in anything. One of my coworkers has her degree in theater, and it actually makes sense if you think about it, because we give programs. We have people here that have an English major. Mine is Parks and Rec. I always joke, like, I took the traditional route. I've known I wanted to be a park ranger since I was like 10 years old. But you can, really, it can be from any kind of background. And you go on usajobs.gov. I'll share that resource as well. I'm not sure the different ages of everyone out here, but the best time to apply for seasonal positions is usually in the winter months for the summer season. And it's not just park ranger, I do interp, which doesn't mean like translating languages. So I interpret the resource. So I like teach people about nature. I give education programs. You can be an EMT, you can be a biologist. I always say the Park Service is like its own, and Fish and Wildlife is like its own like community. We have everything here. We even have accountants. So you can do anything in the Park Service.
That was the best money I made throughout college. It was And I met a lot of people, actresses, like you said, and everything, because I didn't realize a lot of theater folks were in there and people from all over the United States. Really
Yeah.
great career opportunity, so go for it.
For sure.
Awesome.
I am going to, I'm still here. I'm gonna pause my video. I just need to plug in I realize my computer is not plugged in, but I'm here. Right over here.
Well, Andrea, I guess we can start maybe even.
Yeah, so if there's any last questions, final questions for our ranger, then we'll take them now. And I hope everyone is planning for their next visit to Jamaica Bay.